Okay, Imani, just to give you a bit of a background on the background, or a background on the whole context, is that we're not here to criticize you. We're actually here to, in a way, assist you, to comment. So it's not necessarily to pull you apart. It's not like a defense. It's more to illustrate where you've been and whether you are on the right track. So you get 20 minutes to present. You shouldn't go over that. I'm going to actually stop you after 20 minutes. So the thing is to focus mainly on your methodology. That's what we are. A lot of students actually focus too much on their theoretical framework and their conceptual frameworks. So we after a while, I'm going to show you to carry on to do your methodology, because to us that's where the crux actually lie in terms of feasibility and doability of the study. Okay. Well, good luck. Sorry, let me tell you further. You can do a presentation for 20 minutes. For 10 minutes, the panel can ask you questions. Then we're going to ask the guests to leave, and the panel will then decide you to leave, and the panel will decide on whether we confirm your study or not. You're called back into the venue. You are given the results. And that's the whole process. Okay. You can stop now.
All right. Good afternoon, everyone.
Hello, Imani.
I'll be presenting my MPhil thesis proposal in international studies, and I'm broadly looking at the securitization of immigration. Most specifically, as my title suggests, Donald Trump and the securitization of asylum seekers and refugees, a case study of the run-up to the 2016 US presidential elections and the first 100 days of the Trump administration. This is just an overview of the key points I'll be covering: the introduction, research aims, methodology, chapter outline, and just a progress review. All right, so now to contextualize the study, immigration has been securitized in the US and other Western countries, as put forth by a lot of people such as Bourbeau. And I want to look at the discursive construction of asylum seekers and refugees by US President Donald Trump during the elections and in the first 100 days of his term in office. And securitization, broadly speaking, is when you take an issue and you construct it into a security threat. So to what extent has Donald Trump's rhetoric implied or suggested that asylum seekers and refugees would be a security threat? Now, the interesting thing is the context within my study is located. The 2016 US elections coincided with what the UN has described as the largest refugee crisis on record since World War II. As this diagram paints a picture of it, I mean, you've got more than 65 million people that have been forcibly displaced from their homes. Refugees make up 22.5 million. And the interesting thing is that more than half of these refugees come from Syria, Afghanistan, and South Sudan. So a lot of people are fleeing their homes for a number of reasons: conflict, war, and food insecurity. So now, why have I chosen to look at Trump and this time period? Well, during the elections, immigration was quite a hot topic, and Donald Trump came under scrutiny for what some perceived as his anti-immigrant rhetoric, his proposals like the idea of building a wall along the southern border, as well as the way he characterized or othered minorities such as Muslims and Mexican immigrants. So as I've suggested before, my main research is how has Donald Trump discursively constructed refugees and asylum seekers in the run-up to the 2016 US presidential elections and during the first 100 days of his term in office. My sub-questions are: what are the main themes or concerns in Donald Trump's rhetoric when it comes to asylum seekers and refugees? How, if at all, does his discourse and policy proposals contribute to this construction of an us versus them narrative? And finally, how, if at all, have this group of migrants been securitized by Trump? And these are the key concepts that are going to be important in my study. I'm going to start by just defining, broadly speaking, what a migrant is. Basically, according to the IOM, the International Organization for Migration, it's any person who has moved across an international border away from their home, regardless of their legal status, whether the move was voluntary or involuntary, what the causes were, and so forth. So asylum seekers and refugees would fall under this broad umbrella. However, it is important to distinguish between a migrant and a refugee and an asylum seeker. An asylum seeker is a person who seeks safety from persecution or serious harm in a country other than his or her own and is awaiting a decision on the application for refugee status. And finally, a refugee is a person who has fled their home owing to a well-founded fear of being prosecuted for a number of reasons, whether their race, religion, nationality, political opinion, and they're residing outside their country of their home because they can't go back home because of a threat of danger. Now, it's really important to make the distinction is because when you use the term migrant, you're basically implying that the person's move was voluntary. So when people used to speak about the EU migrant crisis, news organizations like Al Jazeera said that it's not a migrant crisis because people that are traveling by boats over the sea are not migrants. They're going there because they're forced to. So it's really important to make that distinction. Another important term that I'll be referring to is stereotyping, the use of stereotypes. Does he use stereotypes in his rhetoric? Stuart Hall defines stereotyping as a representational practice which involves reducing people to a few simple essential characteristics, and it is also an exercise in power because the person who's doing the stereotyping wields a certain position of authority or power over the group that is being stereotyped. And another key term is othering. Othering, broadly speaking, is an expression of prejudice on the basis of group identities. And these group identities can be gender, religion, and so forth. And finally, a key concept is security. Now, I'm looking at the securitization of immigration, but traditionally, security has been associated with national security. The realist conception speaks about protecting the state, speaks about things like military power, war, and so forth. However, a lot of people have said that we need to widen the security agenda and include other dimensions, as encapsulated in the concept of human security. And human security says that there are a number of threats that can pose a threat to the individual and not just the state, such as environmental security, food security, and so forth. My core theories are the securitization theory and social identity theory. Now, the securitization theory was proposed, the proponents were the Copenhagen School of Security Studies, and they basically called for a widening of the security agenda, saying that non-military threats can pose a security threat. Now, securitization is defined as a process by which a political actor, or any actor really, like the media, takes an issue and uses language to transform an issue into a security issue. So it's essentially a speech act which is performed, and through the speech act, a person like Donald Trump might propose unusual methods that fall outside the realm of normal politics to tackle the threat. And I just want to add, with securitization, in order for it to happen, it's important to look at the performative aspect of it, as well as the audience that is receiving this message. And my other theory is the social identity theory, proposed by Henri, Tajfel, and John Turner. And it just says that people derive a sense of self by identifying with a particular social group, and it's been used to explain intergroup conflict. So in this case, the conflict or the in-group could be Donald Trump, and the out-group could be immigrants and the perceived threat that they might pose. Now, broadly speaking, when I was reviewing literature, the key themes that I came across were the securitization of immigration in the Western world, the impact of 9/11, as well as political actors as securitizing actors. Now the key people that have studied this, like Philip Bourbeau, he did a lot of studies of it in Canada and France, and he said that generally in the Western world there is a trend or anxiety towards immigration. And this securitization can also occur not just through rhetoric but through institutions, such as increasing border controls. Another scholar is Maggie Ibrahim. She also writes about securitization, especially in the post-Cold War era. And she said that this securitization also has a racial bias. She actually defines it as this migrant as a threat narrative is in fact a racist discourse, because like her and other people such as Martin Baker, there's almost a sense of a fear of the other, which is at the core of the securitization. So if you look at the groups that are being securitized, you might come across certain patterns. And a more recent study was done by Todd Scribber, who said that during the elections, Donald Trump's rhetoric actually is reflective of the clash of the civilization paradigm, which was put forward by Samuel Huntington, basically saying that the whole world, at the core of conflict between people, is just different cultures coming at war with each other. And other scholars, a lot of different people have written about it as well, as described above, like the US's response to 9/11, creating the Department of Homeland Security, increasing surveillance powers, detaining people, and so forth. Now, the research methodology that I'll be using, this is a qualitative study based in the interpretivist paradigm. I'll be doing a content analysis and discourse analysis of primary and secondary data, public statements, and recordings made by Trump on public platforms. And this includes all his speeches, his broadcast and print interviews, and posts that he's put on his Twitter account. And qualitative research really just wants to gain a deeper understanding of the text. Now, content analysis as well, looking at who's saying what to what effect, and so forth. So through the content analysis, I will be looking at it and seeing if there are any patterns or themes that emerge and what this all means. Discourse analysis, my other method, is looking at the use of language, his language, and how that is being used to convey meaning, as well as examining all of this language in the relation to the context that is taking place. Now, the data collection, I will be collecting all of my sources from primarily factbase.org and Trump Twitter Archive. These are websites that actually collect everything he's ever said and they categorize it. So on Factbase, it's awesome. They have all his speeches, his policy, his interviews, and it's even transcribed. So on any topic, I can just find it there on the internet. My unit analysis, as I've mentioned before, is these statements and recordings between the 16th of June to the 29th of April 2017. The reason why I've chosen those dates is that the first date is when he announced that he was running for office, and the last date is, that's the day that is the last of the 100 days, when people often measure a president's progress. The population, everything that he's ever said, and purposive sampling will be used. So I will actually intentionally seek out statements that contain following keywords like asylum seekers, refugees, Syrian, national security, and so forth. Now for this study, there'll be no need to obtain any ethical clearance, as it's just looking at text. And I've already checked that I will be able to obtain all the data from these databases, namely Trump Twitter Archives and Factbase. And this is just a review of the chapters. Chapter 1 will be an introduction, the research problem, the methodology. Chapter 2 will be the theories. Chapter 3, I'll be presenting my data and analysis of the speeches and statements. Chapter 4, I'm looking at the media, so social media, as well as stuff like print media, broadcast media, and the conclusion will just be wrapping up everything that I've concluded. And this is just a calendar of my projected timeline, the time that I really hope to submit. So in March, coming up next, chapter 2 and so forth. And that's it. Thank you very much.